Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Kathleen E. I'm an independent career consultant with Your Dreams and Goals, and I am also a certified career services practitioner and a certified instructor for the NCDA's Facilitating Career Development Program. Thank you for coming to this webinar on supporting those whose skills are no longer in demand. This is a very timely topic, and I'm glad to hear that you're interested in this. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint, but before that, I'd like to show you my website where you can get more information on this webinar. Lots of links, including the PowerPoint and related handouts. Let me share that screen for you so you can see this. A couple of things I want to point out. I have been in the process of migrating my website from one service provider to another, and it's a very time-consuming and tedious process, and so not all of the links are currently working. You are welcome to check out anything on my website. If you encounter broken links, please contact me directly, and I'll be happy to make sure whatever you're looking for is taken care of. My contact information can be found on my About page. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull up I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint, and I'll go through what is in this PowerPoint file for your benefit. So make sure I'm showing you the right thing. Okay. So now you should be able to see me as well as the PowerPoint. Okay. While we walk you through it. So a couple of things I'd like to address, just go over as we discuss what's in the PowerPoint. Basically, what this this workshop is intended to do, or webinar, is just basically talk about how much the world is changing and how it's affecting people's jobs and how it leaves people, some people may find themselves without marketable skills in this changing world. And that can be a very stressful place to be. And oftentimes people don't know how to respond to that. And so that's what I intended to address with this workshop. Okay, and what you should be able to gain from this is to recognize what kind of emotional challenges these people may be dealing with, identify who would be most at risk for having challenges, and develop some tools to help support them. And also I present some options that they can consider as they think about what their next steps are, and encourage you to take advantage of resources that can help you to support them. One disclaimer I want to point out, I wanted to get this webinar done as soon as possible because we're all watching the news and there's a lot going on in our nation right now. We're seeing a lot of federal workers losing their jobs, and I'm sure that's got to be a very stressful place to be. And this is one reason why my website, I got this webinar done even though my website wasn't done, because I wanted to make sure we could get information to people as quickly as possible. Okay. The disclaimer I have is that this workshop is intended to address a general population of people who might find themselves with their skills no longer being in demand. And again, so this population, these people tend to be seasoned workers. It does not attempt to address the issues specific to these federal workers who are losing their jobs. This to me is just far too new of an issue. I don't know what information is out there about them. I also, from what little I'm hearing in the news, speculate that they are going to have very diverse demographic information. Okay, so I'm not addressing specifically the displaced federal worker issue, but rather, the population in general. Okay, so how this topic came about is a result of a few things. First of all, my own life experience. With my family experience, I didn't make the connection to my own experience until recently. But to give you some idea, for example, my grandfather, my father's father, he used to tell the story repeatedly about how he was married and had a small child when the Great Depression hit. My aunt was born right around that time. At the time, he was working as an accountant, and due to the Depression, he lost his job due to nepotism. And he went out trying to look for other jobs, and he just couldn't seem to find jobs because, if you know the history, jobs were very hard to find. And it was very hard for him and very stressful for him that he couldn't support his family. And I even, we'd hear this story over and over again. And he even told us that he at one point got so desperate that he was thinking about going out and possibly robbing a bank or something. And, so he'd go to jail because then they would take care of his wife and his child. And apparently my dad came along in that process eventually. And eventually, with the New Deal, they apparently either he or one of his friends had a pickup truck, so the government put him to work helping to build the roads and things like that because somebody happened to have a truck. Eventually, things got better, and he wound up getting a job as a mailman, and he stayed in that job until he retired. He never wanted to go back to living like that. Not being able to support his family was very traumatizing for him. And again, he retired as a mailman. Then my dad, he basically went into the Navy at a young man, went through all their testing, and they discovered he had certain talents, and he was eventually put on a path of working with computers. He's one of the original computer programmers who worked on Fortran and COBOL languages. And in fact, I often described him, he was a systems designer. He designed databases. And I would often describe him as one of the guys who created the Y2K problem back in the day. And then, of course, time goes on, and we're coming up at around the turn of the century when everybody was complaining about the Y2K, the planes are going to fall out of the sky. I remember having a conversation with him about all that. And at the time, he was working for a friend of his, and what they did was they had a business that printed business forms, invoices, checks, purchase orders, and things like that. And this was right about the time when the internet was coming into play. And what happened was you get to the point where people are no longer printing invoices and checks and things like that. And instead, they're processing transactions online. So I think the business went out and he got laid off. And at this point, he was near retirement age. And I remember coming to see him one day, and he was sitting there trying to learn the latest programming language, whatever it was at the time. And he was feeling overwhelmed at trying to learn this new programming language at, almost 60 years old. And I told him, I said, Dad, you could go out and, these people are worried about Y2K. You know those languages. You could earn $500 an hour fixing people's computer systems. And he just said, no, I don't want to be bothered. I'm done. Even though he loved his career and he wanted to work as long as he could, he chose to retire at about 60 years old, when he found that his skills were no longer in demand. And, he just didn't want to be bothered. It was too much work for him. And then my situation, somewhere around the same time, I graduated from high school in 1979. I had gotten trained in clerical skills, typing and shorthand. I worked in several office jobs. The last job I worked for in clerical work, I was a department secretary for a division of GTE. If anyone remembers who they are now Verizon. It was a facility where they printed phone books in East Los Angeles. And I worked there for 9 years. And, when I started working there, they had just been bought out. They had worked in another company. And through the 9 years that I was there, they had gone from, again, the facility was there to print phone books. And at one point, they had up to 1,000 people. And in the time I was there, they went from 500 to 200. In the 9 years, they just kept going through these restructurings and they laid people off on numerous occasions. And then finally, my time came around. And when they decided to finally lay me off, it was 1997. And I was thinking, they gave me a package and I said, well, I'll just go get another job doing something else. And I started looking around and realized I thought about trying to get another job with them, but by this time they were anticipating they wouldn't be printing phone books 5-10 years from there, again, because of the dawn of the internet. But most people couldn't see that at that point. And so I also realized that, my clerical skills were starting to be made obsolete. So I decided it was time to go finish. Finally, I had just transferred from the community college to the university. And I decided I need to take this opportunity and go finish my bachelor's degree and go into a new field. Again, I had been a part-time community college student for 18 years right before I transferred. And I get in there, and so I had 6 weeks notice. And last day on the job was on a Friday. On Monday, I was a full-time student. And I finished 120 units because I was highly motivated. And then I went on and I quickly figured out this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with college students. And I went and got my master's degree after that. So I had my bachelor's and master's in 4 years total. But in that process, I just saw this communication disconnect. And I kept looking for answers to my questions and nobody was able to answer them. And that's just what led me to do what I was doing. So anyways, I went in and got my bachelor's, went and got my master's degree. I graduated from my master's in 2001. And at the time, California was having economic problems. That's when our governor was recalled and Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor. And suddenly there were no jobs in education. And so I had very limited experience and it was very challenging to get another job. Then fast forward a few years later, I've been working for several different colleges, state and private and public universities, as well as community colleges. For 9 years, I worked as a community college counselor, where I did everything there, including career counseling, and I taught all of their classes, including career and life planning. And at the same time, I was also working where I'm currently working now, Mount San Antonio College. In that job, I'm not a counselor. I work in the academic support area where my job is to help students develop classroom success skills. So I moved on from the other college, and I think it was about 2016-18, they were talking about this new law that was coming into place called multiple measures, AB 705. Bottom line, and that's what led to this workshop that we're doing today. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but basically, the state wanted to change the way students were put into their math and English classes because they were complaining they were being put in too many remedial classes. And so they're trying to eliminate that whole remedial class pipeline process. And the classes I taught would have been considered, part of that. So everybody in my department, most of us had some kind of master's of education, and that's why we worked in that department. And we are watching this institutional upheaval that was going to make people's jobs basically disappear. Leadership was encouraging all of the tenured faculty to go work in other departments. And those who didn't have an appropriate master's had to go back and get a second master's degree. The adjuncts, if anyone who works in higher ed knows that as an adjunct, you have no job security. So, bottom line, I looked at my situation. I saw they were pushing my tenured person out. I saw the handwriting on the wall. I assessed my situation and I went to my leadership and I said, you know what I need from Mount SAC right now is stability. So I asked him to be put where I am now. I'll go into more detail about what happened in that process later. In addition to myself, I've had other family members. Everybody I know didn't found themselves being forced into unexpected early retirement. I have family, friends, neighbors who've, for different reasons, have also found themselves in this situation where they're unemployed and their skills not in demand due to things like laws and economy and things like that. Again, as I said, I've worked in higher education as both a counselor and educator, and I've had other staff roles. And so I've been helping students since 1997, when I was an undergrad. And I've also, while I was working as a counselor, I led a support group for people who are long-term unemployed at my local church. And it was during the Great Recession when it was really hard for people to get jobs. So that was another place I got experience. And then also I have done guest speaking at American job centers. And I presented this topic in 2018 or 19 at the California Career Development Association. But what it ultimately led me to create this as a workshop was when they were trying to pass that AB 705, and these 40 to 60 faculty are just stressed out because they are seeing that these jobs aren't, it's like they're trying to eliminate our jobs. And this is not just our campus, this is statewide. So where are people going to go when everything you're doing is being eliminated? So I talked to my dean. She told me to go to the faculty union, and together he and I created the first version of this workshop that you're going to see today. And then today, like everybody else, I'm watching the news and I'm seeing how all the changes that the federal administration is making is causing a lot of federal workers to lose their jobs. And those of us with a background in career development, our hearts break for them. And we know all too well what that must be like, what they're going through. And so I wanted to provide this resource to these people, as well as those of us who are qualified to support them. And people were thrilled that I was willing to offer this pro bono. And it's like, this is my way of contributing to the country, is to empower those of you who are career development and other people who want to support this population. Okay. Again, it's just one thing I can do is give you some resources and some tools and some suggestions of things they can try. Sorry, that's so long. In the meantime, I want to let you know, I'm going to show you, there is a web page for the support providers. And then there's also a web page for the actual clients themselves. It's a client-facing website. And there's two, because I'm a real firm believer in tailoring the message to the audience. The PowerPoint that I created for those of you who are service providers, it does not go into as much depth as the client-facing PowerPoint is. Okay, so now let's get into the content of what I wanted to cover here. A couple of things I want to talk about. First thing is, I loved my undergraduate degree, which was in communication with an emphasis in public relations. Every day for the last 25 years, I am being reminded how they drilled it into my head. You need to know who your audience is and tailor your message for them. If they don't understand your message, then change your message so that they will understand it. So that's the first thing I'd like to encourage you as service providers, is to know who your audience is and realize that one size does not fit all. Okay. So what I want to do is let's go back to, I'm going to pull up the web page here. And there's a couple of resources I have that I'd like to encourage you to check out. And again, I have learned to put everything on my web page, and different people will decide what they're interested in, what they're not. Now, there's one document in particular I mentioned that I'm going to show you. I have a couple of handouts that I want to point out to all of you. And this is not here. I do. Looks like I could download this one. So I'll download this right now. Again, I mentioned that I presented earlier versions of this topic, to the faculty where I work, as well as to the CCDA conference. And then here's the webpage for the client-facing workshop. What I wanted to show you right now is this idea of know your audience. As I said, I'm transferred into a new role. I'm no longer a classroom instructor. But this is the one handout I wanted to show you, which for those of you, if you're not 100% sure who you're going to be talking to, if you don't know who your clients are, somebody convinced me when I talked to them about the idea of knowing your audience, tailoring your message to get the result you want. So I turned this into a workshop that we offer in ONSAC. Okay, and so it's intended to get you to think about who are you talking to so you can tailor your message accordingly. So again, that's just one of the several resources I wanted to show you. Okay, you're welcome to download that. That is available on the website. And I'll give you an example of where this really matters. I know that, for example, a lot of times we talk about the idea of offering coping strategies. And a lot of times some people want to offer something, for example, when you're trying to teach coping strategies. And just to give you from a personal example, maybe some artistic activity like painting or drawing or something like that. I'm an intuitive thinker. My personality preferences are intuitive thinking. And the one thing about us, what stresses us out is incompetence. I have always known I am not artistically inclined. So when somebody expects me to engage in some artistic activity as a stress reductor, unfortunately, the only thing it does is it stresses me out because it makes me feel incompetent. So somebody who wants to teach me about coping strategies, expecting me to sit there and draw is not a very effective approach. Okay, so just again, whereas my experience has been often people, for example, people who have preferences for intuitive feeling often have artistic interests, and that for them that might be a very good appropriate coping strategy. Again, we'll get more into that in a minute. So a couple of things you can do to help your clients cope is number one, know who your audience is. And if you don't have a clear idea of who you're dealing with, I would encourage you to check out that handout. It can walk you through the process. Another thing I'd encourage you to do is understand what these people are dealing with. And that's on another slide in a minute. And also get familiar with both the service provider webpage as well as the client-facing webpage. Okay, they are slightly different. Another thing is just meet your clients where they are, address their concerns. And what I mean by that is a lot of the people you'll be dealing with, you may have people, if, let's say your specialization is job search strategies, and somebody comes to you and they want help, they want your, they're telling you they want you to look at their resume, by all means. If that's where they're at, meet them there. But I've had enough experience working with the unemployed to know that a lot of times these people are so overwhelmed with all the emotions they're feeling, they cannot make a decision. The reason, what caused me to create this topic in the first place was when I saw my colleagues who were tenured faculty were so stressed out. I remember one person in particular wound up having to be taken out of her classroom on an ambulance because she was so stressed. When they're that stressed out, they can't think about what they want to do for their future. Okay. And so in that case, they need to deal with their emotional reactions. And we're going to get there in a minute. Okay. Another thing you can do to help them is, again, meet them where they are, address their concerns, help them identify their needs and priorities. And a couple of my handouts that I've provided can help you with that. And then, of course, help them develop effective coping strategies. And for those of you who are trained in career development, you should be trained in counseling skills. Just use those to listen to them and to help them figure out what they're doing. And another thing, again, keep in mind this will not always be appropriate, but for the person who's ready to have that conversation, encourage them to find meaning and purpose in this. However, if that person's in crisis mode, they are not going to want, that is not going to be an appropriate conversation, okay? So just consider who your audience is. Okay, I think I may have skipped the page. Okay, let me get a little ahead. Okay, so yes, this is how you can help them cope. Sorry about this. Let me focus. All right, so a couple of things to keep in mind is research shows that traditionally speaking, some people can tend to are able to get jobs fairly quickly. Others take some time, and then there are other people who typically have are more inclined to have a hard time finding another job. And these people are likely going to need more support because basically their transition is going to be greater. And typically these people, and it may be any combination of people who are over 40 that do not have a bachelor's degree, and those who've been long-term employed, been in the same job for 10, 20 years, especially if they were in just one position. They just tend not to be able to adapt very well. And so that these people in particular are going to need additional support. Okay. Now, here's the page I was looking for. What this is, and as mentioned in the description in my bio, this information comes from a combination of sources. I did several research projects during my undergraduate and graduate program, as well as my experience, as well as professional, and even the facilitating career development curriculum covers a lot of these things. But a lot of times when people are unemployed, especially if they're facing a situation where their options are limited, they're likely to experience any combination of emotional reactions. Number one is they're likely to feel overwhelmed and unable to keep up with the rapid pace of rapid change that's going on in their world. For me, just migrating all my hundreds of documents over to my website and realizing how much everything's changed since I've been in the classroom, it's like that was overwhelming me. I can imagine what somebody, if they didn't see this coming, they're just, this is overwhelming for them. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, and these are reactions they may have towards their employer. Or future employers. A lot of times when they lose their job, they feel betrayed. I gave that company everything I had, and look what they did. Oftentimes they're dealing with transitions, and this is what I saw a lot with my colleagues was, and this is from Bridges' book, his theory on transitions, excellent theory for anyone who wants to learn more about this. Basically, transitions involve three things: endings, neutral zone, and new beginnings. A lot of times the reason somebody's having a hard time moving on is they're still in the endings. They have not let go of their old life yet. And part of the letting go is that leaves you in neutral zone, and that can be a really scary place to be. Okay. And it's once they let go of the old life, then, and when they're in the middle of nowhere still, then they can even begin to think about, where do I want to go next? Okay. Oftentimes, they've got a lot of grief they're dealing with, the possibility of losing your job, your friends, your identity, your lifestyle. And again, if you've been trained in this stuff, you're probably familiar with the theory of grief, that it involves denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and acceptance. A lot of times, they may resent the possibility of having to start over. I'm 40 or 50 years old. I don't want to have to go back and earn minimum wage after I've worked all these years to get where I am. That kind of thinking. A lot of times when you're in this predicament, you start regretting, your prior life choices, your education choices, your career choices. Why did I go? And one thing, I don't remember where I saw this, but one of the pieces of information I found said that people who have bachelor's degrees and are having a hard time getting a job, what they're dealing with is why did I bother getting this degree if it's not, that kind of expectation. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they take this stuff personally. It's like, oh, they did it to me. It's all about, it's personal to them that they were let go. Okay. And the reactions of political strife, that's talking about what's going on right now. As far as I know, that is still too new and too emerging. I don't think there's any evidence out about whether or not people are having adverse reactions to the politics. What's interesting is when I present this, as I said, I started with the faculty, and then I presented it when I was doing the guest speaking at the Career One Stops in Orange County, California. And I would present this to them. Okay, so I'll show you this one more slide here, two more slides. Another emotional reaction, a lot of these are more personal. A lot of times they're just shocked. They didn't expect this, and and so sometimes they're just in shock, because they didn't see this coming. A lot of times they're just lost and they don't know what to do. For me, I was never lost. And again, I had already been in school. My problem is I didn't know what to do. And I didn't have anyone who knew how to help me. And that's what frustrated me. A lot of times, some people could be dealing with unmet expectations. I was supposed to retire from this job, and here they go. They lay me off when I'm 57 years old. I'm too old. I'm too young to collect unemployment. Now, retirement. Now, what am I supposed to do? They could be experiencing paradigm shift. They thought reality was one thing, and now it's this. Obviously, it's very stressful. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear over the unknown, and fear of the loss of livelihood. How am I going to pay my rent? Anything about that? I don't like it when we do that. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't like it when it doesn't go where I want it to go. Personally. Okay. So again, a lot of times they get hopeless, and especially the longer term, the longer they've been unemployed, the worse these emotional responses become. They can feel worthless and useless, and some people may have what's referred to as a crisis of faith, where it causes them to question what the foundation that they put their life into, their spiritual life or otherwise. And then finally, I was reviewing some of these academic papers that I've uploaded to the webpage from 25 years ago, and I've forgotten that one of the interviews I talked about, and I realize this is so consistent, still true, is that in addition to their own internal stuff and the challenges of looking for a job, they're often dealing with a lot of conflict with their loved ones. Somebody being unemployed is very stressful on the family members, the people they love with, because now they're worried about whether or not they can pay the rent, whether or not they can pay the bills. Oh my God, are we going to lose our home? Type of thinking. Oftentimes, people are going to look at them and think they're being, judge them. You're not doing enough, otherwise you'd have another job by now. And they often get pressure. Oh, just get a job. Even if they are looking, people don't think they're doing enough. Just getting a job. And when I was, they received a lot of endless, unhelpful and unwanted advice. I remember when I had to recruit for the support group that I was offering in the church, and they had an event. And I had learned the way to persuade, again, it was during the Depression or the recession when so many people were unemployed. The way I got a couple of people to come join the group was saying, yeah, do you get tired of all the advice people want to give you? Oh, yeah, and to help them connect. So that was an interesting idea that got their attention. So all of these things just adds to the stress and the conflict between they and their loved ones. And again, what I was saying was when I did an interview with a woman who works with this population, she talked about how their families don't always appreciate the need to get retraining because they want them to just get a job so they can pay the rent. So again, I talked about all those things. The question is, as you can imagine, going back to all these different things you're dealing with, when I would offer this topic in the One Stop Center, which is for people who need help finding a job, and they would be in there and I present all these things, I said, I'd say that you're likely dealing with any combination of these reactions. And then I'd have them stop and talk to each other and process and say, which of these reactions are you dealing with? I thought they'd say, one or two of them. Most common response I'd get was all of the above. So, it's not like 2 out of 10. It was everything on there they could relate to. And again, understand all this emotional stuff should help people understand why sometimes some people just shut down. It's just overwhelming. So next thing you can do is help them evaluate their situation, because a lot of times, again, if they're lost, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to proceed. So one thing you can do is help them identify their current situation. A lot of times people, they see this job loss coming, and, or they're concerned it could happen, but not necessarily. And so maybe what they haven't lost their job, but they're concerned they may lose their job. What you can do is help them, if they want to maintain their current job, learn not to take what's going on personally or get defensive. Don't resist a change, even if you don't like it. And again, this is in general. This isn't referring to people who are being expected to do things that are unethical. It's another issue. And then just encourage them to if your priority is to keep your job, then cooperate with what leadership is doing. I remember having a conversation with a manager who had to spend their time trying to persuade people to move on. And I said, yeah, I've learned you just cooperate. Because when people fight you and you're trying, it just pisses people off. That manager could not stop laughing. This is something she could really do. So yeah, resisting the change, just invites that you're going to be the first one to be let go. Has been my experience. I've seen this over and over. I remember one gentleman I worked with, when I worked for the computer department, and they went from mainframe to PCs, and he flat out refused. He is not going to program on that PC. That is not a real computer. And then, of course, sure enough, when a round of layoffs came, he was shocked when he was one of the ones who got let go. That's pretty common. I see that. So, again, if they want to stay, if they want to keep their job and they haven't lost it already, then cooperate with whatever leadership's doing. Okay, now, here's a big point, probably why a lot of you came here. Some things they can do. If their job is already ended and they're figuring out what are their next steps. The difference between this PowerPoint and the one that's client facing is that one gives a lot more detailed information. This PowerPoint is based on the assumption I'm talking to people who already understand career development. And so I don't need to explain all of these concepts to you. So a couple of options they can consider is they can update their current skills to meet whatever the current labor market demands are. For example, I know one thing that a lot of people are pushing right now, and even my college, they're encouraging people to incorporate AI in our teaching. I do intend, that's on my my goals list, is to get more involved with AI. So if you want to stay with your employer, so some options, again, if it's an option, is stay with your current employer. And that's what I chose to do in the last situation where I saw the handwriting on the wall and I said, I just want a stable job. I chose another position. You can look for opportunities when you're within your industry. And here's one, if you're dealing with somebody who's a seasoned worker who has a lot of skills and experience, there is a resource on the website called Sequel Careers. It is a book by an author named Lawrence Shucken, I believe his last name is. There is a video that is a synopsis of what the book's talking about. And basically what he's saying is take your skills, pretty much my paraphrase is up the next level. Take your skills and teach. Be a communicator, be a leader, all these different avenues you can go. And again, that would be good for a seasoned person. Okay? Another thing you can do. Sometimes PowerPoint's a little too sensitive. Okay. So again, if they want to work with this technical knowledge and skills they have, take a look at the Sequel Careers stuff. Another thing they can do is focus on looking for opportunities outside of their industry, focus on the transferable skills. Again, those of you who are trained in career development, you should understand what transferable skills are. For those of you who are not that familiar, that is one of my additional workshop topics that I have listed on my webpage. and there's a PowerPoint for that. But to give you an example, I discovered with this role I'm in now, my job basically is I'm a non-credit instructor, and my job is to be the instructor on duty in the all-campus tutoring center, where they have all-campus tutoring and all-campus computer labs where students can come in and use the computer. And my office is right inside the computer lab, and I am surprised how much my prior life as a secretary has come in handy. I'm pretty tech savvy, and you have students come in, especially, returning students who don't really have the computer skills. Somebody needs help with the computer. They don't know how to use Word. I've let all my colleagues know that I'm pretty proficient on Microsoft Office. So, feel free to let me know if somebody needs help with that. And it also, my, years of work doing clerical work, I have very strong administrative skills and organizational skills. And because of that, I was a driving force behind a student success workshop program that we have, and I provided a link to that. So my computer skills, my organizational and my administrative skills made it possible for us to create this robust student success workshop program. And you're welcome to check that out. I provided a link to that. Okay, again, and like I said, I'm just surprised how many times those clerical skills have come in handy. Another thing they can do is they can retrain for a new career. And so this is a person, maybe, their industry is dead. The only thing you know how to do is print phone books. That's a dying industry. Sorry about that. But so somebody, and that's again one of the reasons why I decided that my best step would be to finish my degree. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so again, some people may choose, and they may either want or need to retrain for a new career. You might also find people who want to go to school. I was told that one person, when they lost their job, they decided they were in a law enforcement position, and now they're deciding I'm going to go ahead and go get, become a lawyer. And they want to go to school and get their law degree. And it may be very similar, it may be very, it could be something different. And this is where the education and the career counseling comes in handy, for those of you who have that training. So now we're going to talk about some less conventional options. And again, through my years of working and watching other people go through similar process than I did. This first one, I just recently added this. Freelancing is really a pretty popular option these days. And especially with things like Upwork and all these, social media platforms where you can put yourself in there. If somebody wants to go out there and be a web designer, for hire or whatever, that's an option. And that basically involves starting your own business. Some people could find themselves wanting to start a for-profit or a non-profit business. Okay. Another thing you can do is capitalize on a current trend based on your skill set. Like I mentioned, the idea with my dad, it's like he could have made so much money, when everybody's so worried the planes are going to fall out of the sky. Go out there and clean up people's Y2K computers. Okay. Nowadays, with everything that's going on with our current market, if people have special skills, perhaps they can use that to, depending on what their skill set is, maybe there's a place they can take advantage of the given trends. Another thing they can do is just get a day job. Maybe you need a job that helps you pay the rent. I know somebody who wanted to be a handyman, but it turns out that kind of work is just not consistent enough to be able to pay the rent. So he eventually figured out, go out and get a day job where I had the paycheck to pay the rent, the car, and whatever, and I can do that stuff, the fun stuff on the side. Again, some people may choose to go back to school and get additional. I remember one woman I knew who, during the Great Recession, when teachers were losing their jobs. She went out and she used her unemployment time to go out and get additional teaching credentials. And of course, she did go back into the field when the economy got better. Some other, you can retrain for new careers. Some people, if they're in a position to do so, obviously this isn't appropriate for everybody. Some people can choose to retire. And some people may choose to go out on disability leave, long-term or short-term, if maybe they're dealing with some kind of health problems. I know at least one person from, I work with, when they found themselves in this position, they were dealing with this serious health issues, and they just decided. One person in particular took time off, and another person retired and then was dealing with health issues. So that's an issue. That's an option. The third option, another option is some people, they could be having family life issues going on where they're having to, they're overwhelmed with taking care of family members, whether it be children or somebody in the sandwich generation where they're suddenly their parents or other elders are needing to be taken care of. And, that just their personal circumstances can be so overwhelming, they're better off just taking a season off work and just becoming a full-time caregiver. I remember I had encountered a few ladies when I was working for the One Stop Center who, I think it was One Stop and possibly the support group, where one in particular stands out in my mind. She had been off work for a while and she was living with an elder in her family who, couldn't live alone, and she was their caregiver. Now, of course, that person's going to need to make a, decision eventually. But in the meantime, it gives them something to do. Or maybe the parents are just need to be taken care of, or maybe you have a disabled family member or something like that. And I had somebody tell me about, and some of the resources that I'm going to tell you about with this one. Somebody I met recently told me that if the person you're caregiving for is on Medicaid, at least this is in California, this may not be true in other states, but if you're willing to go to school and get trained to be a caregiver, you could potentially get paid to be a caregiver. But I guess it's dependent upon the person receiving the care having Medicaid benefits. And of course, with everything going on in the government, we don't know how long that will be. And that's just a caveat. And there is some links to that information on my webpage. I personally have not done it. I've just been told about it. Okay, so I'm not going to vouch for it. I just know somebody who's doing it. So the next step, how can you help them take action? Again, be familiar with these options that we discussed. And again, these are just some potential options. They may decide on something else, but those are some resources, some things to consider. Another thing you can do, my experience has been working with, especially when you're dealing with not only baby boomers, but people raised by baby boomers. Baby boomers grew up in a world with an expectation that get a good job and you're set for life. And so oftentimes, and then they tend to teach their children to think like this. So oftentimes, these people, when they look at a job, they are thinking, "Oh my God, am I going to retire from that job? Can I retire from that job?" And sometimes that's where their conflict comes from. Is they don't realize how much everything can and will change. I had a mother with a high school daughter come to me for support recently. And we were talking about where she wanted to go to school. And the mother said, "Oh yeah, because the mother's she's been a nurse forever. And, she's looking for a forever job for her daughter." And I reminded the mother, I said, "That's baby boomer thinking. In her world, those jobs aren't going to be around forever." So the concept is to help them understand the concept of labor market trends. My experience has been most average adults don't really think in terms of trends. Okay. And I do have a resource on my website called Understanding Labor Market Trends. You're welcome to share that with them. It helps you understand. It also gives tips for how to deal with down trends. Okay. Another thing you can do, because a lot of times they get stuck when they just can't find a similar job, and help them recognize that maybe they need to pivot. Just do something like in my case, okay, the kind of jobs I was teaching, the classes I was teaching at Mountain Sac, they're not going to be around much longer because of this AB 705. I need to do something slightly different, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Some people may need help making a decision, but remember, this is their decision to make, not yours. Okay. Another thing, good news for those of you, I would imagine many of the people who have chosen to come to this workshop are job search coaches. When the person is ready for that, by all means, help them. And that's why I'm doing this and why I offer to do this pro bono, is so that you can help people, adapt to what's going on in our world. Okay. So what I want to do is encourage you how you can help them. And again, based on my own experience and watching what other people go through, the key here is to help them get the right help from the right person at the right time. And in order to do that, I'm going to show you another one of my handouts that, as I said, for those of you who are trained in career development, I opened up all of my, okay, this one here. I'm going to show you this one to help. You'll quickly discover that one of my talents is creating written resources. And this is what I do for my coping strategies. So I get frustrated with something, it eventually turns into a handout, almost a joke there. But when I was teaching the career and life planning class over and over again, I noticed that the students, as I'm taking them through the self-awareness process and all the assessments, they would get lost and they get frustrated. They didn't understand what we were doing. So I created this handout called how do you find and get your dream job or career? And I should point out to them there's processes. There's phase 1 is self-awareness. Phase 2 is figure out what your options are. Phase 3, reflection. What have you learned about yourself? And what does this tell you about what kind of goals you should pursue? Now, like I said, when I had to take a graphic design class in my undergrad, because that's one of the skills that public relations people do, and I'm watching what all my classmates could do, and I'm looking at what I'm doing, and I'm thinking to myself, if I have to compete with them for a job, I'm going to starve to death. And again, like I said, I've always known that I'm not artistically inclined. And so I don't want to pursue jobs that require a lot of artistic talent because I'm not going to be successful. I lack the talent. Mm-hmm. And so that's the kind of thing you encourage them to do is what are you learning about yourself through these assessments? So options exploration, reflection, decision implementation, how much educate, that's where you start. Once you figure out this is what I want to do, you start looking at education. How much time are you willing to spend in school? As I said, maybe, a police officer deciding he wants to go become a lawyer, he's willing to go to law school. Whereas perhaps some of your I've had people come in and their attitude is, I'm perfectly comfortable doing warehouse work. I don't care. I'll do what you need me to do. I don't want to spend a lot of time in school. And that's okay too, if that's who they are. All right. So, and then you have decision implementation. And then the last phase is when life throws you a curveball, what do you do? Okay. Now, this next page I created when I had a student one time that had already given them this handout. And they said, oh, yeah, okay, I decided I want to be a teacher. I said, okay, great. Now I need to go talk to the education counselor. And she goes, oh, but you're my counselor. And it dawned on me that they don't know the difference between a career counselor and an academic counselor. So that's where I created this page. And the color coding is basically, again, different kinds of counselors specialize. There's a common skill set of the helping skills, which in facilitating career development, I believe is the first chapter. The basics of things like listening. So they all have that in common, but where they differ is what process and the helping process where do they help, what is their specialized skill set? Career counselor focuses on self-awareness, options exploration. Education counselor or an academic counselor is going to focus on, okay, you want to be a teacher, here are the classes you need to take. You want to teach high school versus college, there's going to, high school versus K through elementary school, you're going to be taking different sets of classes. Okay, again, that's an academic counselor. Reflection, a lot of times that could be the career. Sometimes the education people get involved, again, helping you figure out your education plan. Decision implementation, and then career, identifying the job search strategies. This is where a lot of career coaches that I see are involved with NCDA. This is their specialization. How do you get that job, and how do you go out there and do the networking and making sure you have a good resume and all that kind of thing. And as a career services provider, that, one thing I've learned with my colleagues, we learn to say, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm willing to do, this is what I don't want to do. I love doing the self-awareness and the options exploration. I don't enjoy, if the client wants me to do the job search, I'm more than happy to help them if that's what they want, but that's not my specialization. And I expect that many people in this webinar this is their preferred specialization. This evaluation and renegotiation, this is where you're likely going to find people like a psychologist, mental health counselor. These are people who, and spiritual counselors, the people who are dealing with paradigm shift and unmet expectations and, things that are affecting your self-esteem and things like that. That's going to be a different specialization. So sometimes just recognizing where you fit, which of these kind of counseling roles, where you are, could help. Again, financial aid people, can the person afford their goals? So as you're working on helping your client, maybe what they need is something outside of your specialization or even your role, for example. And so best thing you can do for your client is to refer them. In the facilitating career development curriculum, in the ethics chapter, it talks about what are you trained to do and what is your role. And when we first started doing our workshops program, we're trying to develop it, we ran into this all the time where people wanted us in my department where I worked to get involved with it. It was like doing a workshop on LinkedIn and resumes and stuff like that. But then we'd run into problems with the Career Center because that's their job. I may be skilled and qualified to teach these things, but it's not my role. Okay. So that's one thing you can do is again, make sure they get help them get the right help from the right person at the right time. And so, like, for example, if you're working for a big college, identify what resources does your institution already provide? And what resources can you provide? I'll give you an example of this. About the time I got into my new role, a woman by the name of Sarah Goldrick Rabb, I believe is her name, came up with coined the terms food and housing insecurity, and talked about how so many college students are, food and housing insecure, and it can it can affect their success. And Mount SAC picked up on that, and we created a basic skills department. And that department is being led by a social worker, somebody with a social work background, which is going to be very different from my background. So my job, if I identify that a student comes in and they are dealing with, food and housing insecurities, to send them to the basic needs department. Okay. It is possible that the institution you work for is not willing to do that. It's just not within their culture or within their mandate of what they do to provide that kind of resource. So if that's the case, then you want to see, again, what resources do you not provide? And then if you don't provide something they need, then what you want to do is have referrals. Okay. And that's where a couple of the other handouts that you can download from my website can help you figure this out. So I want to show you these handouts and show you how to use them. As as you can identify what to do. Okay. So again, to help you, what do we have to offer? I mentioned this idea of different types of counselors, and then identify what kind of referrals you need. So let me show you those referrals. And let me show you, for example, the good one to start with. Again, this handout is just the PowerPoint as a handout, and then the needs of the unemployed. When I was working in the Career Center at the college where I was a counselor, again, it was in the middle of I was working there right before the Great Recession. And and I was helping create workshops. That's when we discovered I have a talent for creating workshops. And one of the ones that I have listed there is called Unemployed and Looking for Answers. And what that says is what they need is information, resources, and support. And in that workshop, I would give them this handout, which is intended, again, because if you're trying to talk to them about their resume when they're worried about they can't feed their child, that's not helpful to them. So this is intended to help them identify, what do I need? Information about what resources are available. Because if the only thing you've ever done is gone to work every day and try to live within your means of your paycheck, you have no idea how to ask where you can get help. Okay. And so what it is, and then this column is, do I need this? Yes or no? And then these are some resources that I'm suggesting, including mine, where you get the information, and then my related handouts. So if you say you get to here and it's like, oh, work and career restarts, what's that? Well, that's a workshop I created recently. So you can check that one out. So again, some of the stuff that I have to offer. And so you have information that they need about what's available to them, job search skill, information about job search skills, information about career guidance, information about education guidance, information about goal setting, and then resources. Okay, now I know what I need is like, how can I meet my need for housing, utilities, food, clothing, non-food, groceries, other things like household goods, medical needs, transportation, and food and clothing. It's in here. I'm trying to remember this. Medical needs. You lose your job, you lose your medical insurance, you can't pay for your prescriptions. So what are you going to do then? Transportation. Some people depend on public transportation. Technology. A lot of times when people lose their job, if they've been in the same job, their technology skills are not current. Need to get some bills paid. Child care, elder care, family care, pet care. One thing that was really tragic during the Great Recession, if anyone remembers, here in California, the real estate market was hit really hard because of subprime housing. I heard stories from real estate agents how they would have a house that was foreclosed upon and it's abandoned. They show up and there's a dog tied up in the backyard. And oftentimes these people are so stressed out, they can't handle dealing with their pet. Okay. But what's interesting as far as resources go, when it comes to things like pet care, there are nonprofits out there that would find it a whole lot easier to give you a bag of food because you can't afford to feed your pet. They would much rather do that than to actually have to rehome your pet. Because rehoming a pet is a lot harder than giving you food. So again, depending on what they're dealing with, this may or may not be an issue, but recognize that's something they can do to help them. They may need job search support. Again, do they need Looking at resources. Where do we go to get education? Maybe they need to upgrade their computer skills. I know a lot of the community colleges here in California have non-credit classes to develop those computer skills people may not have. Okay. Or the city. I've been working for the city as a contractor, and they have a lot of computer classes, so things like that. Again, do you need to upgrade your computer skills? Do you need to update your current licensing? One of the gentlemen I work with in the unemployed support group at the church, he used to be a pastor and he was coming to the conclusion he wanted to go back to the pastor, but he needed to update his pastoral license, things like that. Educational expenses, that's where things like financial aid come in, goal setting, other barriers, people who have criminal records, for example, that may be a challenge. Referrals, where can you send them to deal with these, to address these needs? Okay, again, same thing. So the point with this is go through the list step by step and where can they get the help? Professional networking, show them where they can find that help. Okay. Spiritual support, social support, family support. Unfortunately, a lot of times when people, are long-term unemployed, they wind up losing their home and they can get evicted and they might need legal assistance for something like that. Okay. So what I encourage people to do, help them if they're prioritizing, is listen to your inner voice, and that'll help you decide what's most important. Somebody who's not in a financial crisis and they are ready, just help me with my I'm good financially. I need you to look at my resume. Great. And look at their resume if that's what they're looking for. Okay. So again, that's a resource that can help you. And then the needs of the unemployed is basically a handout. And I realize how much the world has changed and that I created this a few years back. And this information changes so much over time. So a couple other things I want to show you. Again, this is a handout that my colleague created for coping strategies. Again, she created this and I told her she did an excellent job. Can I use it? And I added a few examples, but basically she's the author. So she gave me permission to offer this. So things like talking to people, relaxation techniques, problem solving, humor, physical activity, quality time with your loved ones or pets. People have pets, they're important to you. Express your creativity. Remember what I said, some people that is a great source of self-care. Community service. Sometimes people can get a lot of self-care from serving others. Another thing that you should find helpful, and this is a handout, in today's world where everything is changing so fast and they're expected to make decisions for the next 10 years, how can you when everything's changing? This is intended to get people to realize what's stable, what's not, and what would make good foundation for making decisions on. The labor market, formal learning options, the labor market trends, in demand, careers of today, future in demand, that stuff's changing constantly. You don't want to put your whole life into that because you don't, that can change tomorrow. This is stuff you can develop, education, skills, knowledge, experience. And if you're looking for something stable upon which to base your decisions, look at who you are. Personality, talents, generation, that's all inborn. Interest, values, preferred style. These things are both inborn and experience-based. Again, career development, higher education, and CTE, and workforce development. Okay. So that's another resource that hopefully you would find helpful. And as I said, if anyone wants to see the prior versions of this workshop, that's what those are. And again, this section of my webpage is some of my resources that you as service providers should find useful. The client-facing webpage, unemployed looking for answers. This was when I'm not a financial planner, but all the lessons I learned the hard way of being underemployed for several years. Transitions can be very disorienting. And then this is a top popular topic, how to get your dream career. This workforce development versus career development was created by Daniel Newell, and he presented that, I think, in 2022 at his California Career Development. So again, some resources to help you. And I mentioned the idea of sequel careers for those of you who are dealing with people who are seasoned workers. And then I mentioned I have been involved in developing a robust student achievement workshop program. And these topics in particular could be very relevant to this audience. So if you want to check those out. And then these are papers I wrote while I was going through school and learning about this population. And then these are all my handouts. The other thing I would like to remind you, as you go, you're welcome to go through my resources and videos and other things. Feel free to check all these things out. But I just want to remind you, I did make sure that all my links on this page are working and the links on the client-facing web page are working. So if you want to download PowerPoints, and then with these ones, I made sure those PowerPoints are up there, but it is likely that these additional links on these other pages are not working. If you encounter a link and it doesn't work, contact me. I'll be happy to provide that information to you. Okay. So again, this is what is going on. I am hoping that you guys will find this information useful. I was thrilled to hear that we had over 200 people sign up. To me, that just tells me the idea of trends are very, very much matter. You know, this is a really big trend and everybody knows, and we want to know how to support people whose jobs are being affected. I hope you can get a lot out of this, and I hope you find it useful. And feel free if you want to, if you have any feedback, feel free to send me an email. And I wish you all in your supporting of your students. Thank you and have a wonderful day.